It is 6:34 on Monday, December 18th, 2017, and we're going to call the school committee meeting to order. We're going to start with our minutes from November 6th and 28th. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from the 6th? I think we tabled them last time because we did not have enough folks to make the motions and vote. Did everybody or anybody get a chance to read the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from November 6th?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, corrections?
That's
edits?
the one I wasn't here at, right?
I don't remember whether that
Isn't that why we had to table it last time?
Yeah,
Because-
Yes, it was. Yeah. But we have enough folks to make the motion this time, so that's okay. So there was no comment or edit, right? From either of you? Okay. So all in favor to approve the minutes from November 6th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This may be the last time we actually do this for the minutes, right? Because we're going to switch to consent vote. November 28th, 2017. Did everybody get a chance to look at those minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
I can make that motion.
Thank you. Any changes, updates, edits, comments, questions? Okay. All right, here none. All in favor to approve the minutes from November 28th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have no visitors today. So we're going to jump into new business. Tab, training request.
I'd like to take that out of order. I believe that Stephen and Ally are here to speak to it.
They will be?
But yes.
After
if
the
they
game?
don't, I can.
Okay.
I can speak to it.
All right, that's fine. So we can jump into the SOS health program.
So the SOS program was previously taught at the junior senior high school several years ago. It was, excuse me, it was provided through grant funding. That guidance was a part of teaching and instructing during health and wellness classes. In the last several years, due to lack of funding, it's no longer being taught, but we are finding through the Prevention Needs Assessment Survey that was given to 8th, 10th, and 12th graders in April, that they're showing a need for support for these types of things, especially the current freshman class had a higher rating than normal for depressive symptoms. So this program helps teach kids to identify the signs and symptoms of suicide. It helps teach them strategies of coping, as well as identifying any red flags that may pop up with their peers and seeking appropriate help through trusted adults, whether that's in the school community, within the schools, or a trusted adult outside. We were looking to bring this in. This was brought up at a health and wellness committee meeting back in October. So I contacted the Massachusetts SOS program out towards Boston and was able to find a couple trainings that were free, because the program is several $100s. And if our staff had attended the trainings, they would give us the program for free with the updated curriculum, because what we have is currently not up to date and current with practices. So Dylan Dubuque, one of our health and wellness educators here at the high school, attended and is in the process of obtaining the kits. So we would like to put this into practice. It does meet the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks for health and fits in with our health curriculum that we've been doing. So we wanted to just share this with you, that that's what we are looking forward to doing.
Is this only done for certain grades, or?
It can be taught for middle school and high school depending on what the curriculum is. Dylan does focus on grades 7 and 8, but I know that they address these topics as well in the older grades. We can check and see if it's possible to also have it offered at the high school level, particularly for the freshman class, because of their responses to the PNAS. And I know that Dylan Dylan Dubuque and Lisa Smeagol, the other health and wellness teacher, have been discussing this. So it's definitely something that we plan on incorporating, because there's definitely a need. Like I've said before when I presented earlier in the fall, mental health is really a big issue that we need to address, so.
Do we,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if we need to send more people through these programs, I guess, or
Well, the training that, the training that he was able to provide for, there were only 2, so he was able to at least attend one, because the other one, the staff wasn't able to. They were occurring on the same day, so finding coverage was just not possible for both of them to lead. So that's why Dylan attended. Charlene Corza was also another instructor at the time, when it was taught previously, so she may be someone else we can bring on board to work with the older students if Lisa's not able to. And she has offered that. She did have the older kit, so if we're able to look at the newer one and see what we can do, that would be terrific.
Yeah. I mean,
So.
considering that, just an assumption, but considering that the pressures are growing as they get older, it may make a lot of sense to include the higher grades in this program as well.
Yes.
The other thing that I wanted to plug in is, I don't know if you were here last time when Annabelle was bringing stuff back from the state advisory committee and the regional advisory committee, but the mental health issue was actually one of the topics that they've been focusing on the last few years. Since students are already focusing on this, I don't know whether there is anything that we can leverage or collaborate on with those students, because there's something obviously going on that front as well. It may be a good way for us to really bring those two sides together.
She did attend our,
Oh, she did,
our
okay.
health and wellness committee meeting we had last week. She did discuss some of the things that they're planning on doing very soon with the students, especially with the National Honor Society, doing Post-its and putting them on every homeroom desk, and for each student, kind of like, you're great, you're doing a great job, like words of encouragement and support and inspiration for them. I know that they plan on making that like a monthly thing, as well as pulling in other things for when the students have their moment of silence after the Pledge of Allegiance, breaking that up and doing that both at the elementary and the high school to kind of help them regroup before they start their day, addressing it in that way as well. So we're just starting to get the ball rolling for that. But Annabelle was fantastic in that she was able to give us a point of view of the things that they're seeing at her level here at the school that as a staff member we may not catch up on, and letting us know what their projects are. So it was great that she was there, and we're hoping that more kids will attend, because their voice, gives us more of an awareness of what is happening within the halls. So.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. And this was actually an overall plug too, that I'm so encouraged that students at every level are thinking about this as an important thing for them. So it's good that we're approaching from the other side and getting their voices in it too. Thank you for that.
It seems as though, similar to like the Peace Builders program, starting at the pre-K level, kindergarten level, that a social, emotional wellness program needs to start really young. So by the time they get older, they have more coping strategies to deal with, the issues that teenagers face,
Right.
as opposed to addressing it maybe for the first time.
Right.
And I know funding's always an issue, but again, similar to this Peace Builders program, and just being in the profession myself, it makes sense to start when kids are really young so that they develop the language at a young age, of how to talk about their feelings, how to talk to somebody when they're feeling a certain way. And it's more natural by the time they get to be freshmen, sophomore, juniors.
Yes, because we're seeing them coming in younger and younger, really struggling to be
Right.
able to, and it's obviously younger, they're not able to always identify their feelings the way they would as they get older, but helping them try to build that resiliency and identify those things in their own way as they grow. Because we do have some students that are struggling with that, and they're starting at West Street and then continuing over, so.
And that's ultimately what it's about, is just developing resiliency. You know, that's something that adults struggle with.
Yeah.
When, you know, a big event happens in their lives that they don't have the tools or the capacity to handle. So I don't know, you know, ideally in a perfect world, as we're discussing budgets, if we had, you know, a line item for social and emotional needs, so, because, you know, again, now we're faced with, well, these are great ideas, but how do you implement them?
Well, I know even as the senior leadership team, we have discussed kind of even changing the structure of even where the kids are sitting at lunch with the staff and having more staff engagement, so that the kids are finding the staff as a central person to go to kind of work around and have, you know, a safe person to go to, but also be able to work through any conflicts that they're having. There's not only seeing them in the classroom, but maybe in the recess or out in the lunchroom, kind of seeing them in more areas so that they're able to reach out to them and have that. But we're trying to work through that and starting to get that situated. I know the Rebecca Mello has been having lunch bunch groups with kids, both at East Meadow and West Street. And we are working with strategies with particular students who are struggling to have a staff member that they trust, that can be doing regular check-ins, and really trying to work to making sure that these kids can be successful in and outside of the classroom.
You know, and to your point, you know, I think as we think about the next strategic plan, and one of the strategies around social emotional learning, I think bringing that back to the school level and making some critical decisions about, does this mean that we train teachers? Does it mean that we train guidance counselors? Does it mean that we need a health teacher at the elementary level who's going to focus on wellness? Does it mean that we have someone like Kate Forrest come in and do regular trainings with students? One of the pages, the new pages for the preschool, has students, the teachers training the kids to take deep breaths, and their picture with the cones on their stomachs. You know, I mean, I think we need to have a long-term vision for what the best way to implement these strategies are in the most effective and efficient ways we can, because resources are tight. So we'll be talking about FY19 guidelines from the school committee to us in terms of the goals and direction that you'd like to see the budget go, and then I think it's incumbent on us to make that happen.
Well, I like that idea.
I think we made it clear that social emotional learning is one of our priorities.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up the strategic plan, because it's going to be a pretty visible part of that too. It's going to, my guess is it's going to take a little bit of education for everyone, because I don't know if you just said it, Deanne, that it's not always easy to articulate, especially in the context of budget, of our budget, why this is important for us and why it should take priority over some other things, and sometimes in addition to other things. And the other thing that you brought up is, and I was thinking about that, this is the second or third meeting we have something related to social emotional learning, and last time it was about mindfulness. The one thing that I heard as we're having that conversation is, even though we had that exercise or that training, it's not always easy, everyone, to really find even the courage to participate. It's something different. Sometimes there's a potential stigma attached to it if you're taking a deep breath and then. But we also heard that there is a benefit to it. How do we really spread these things across the entire district so that everyone can take advantage of all those benefits that we talked about? And by the time, as you were saying, by the time they get to an age where we really need them to learn to cope with certain things and deal with stressful situations. How do we get them to say, yes, I can go to a trustable person and talk about certain things, or I can deal with certain things on my own? So there is a lot around this subject. Maybe we can even devote a whole meeting and focus on those, because it is part of our strategy.
Right, so the next, I'm getting a little ahead in the agenda, but the next strategic planning task force meeting, there were 4 sort of big buckets of strategy that people talked about, and the next meeting we will divide and choose the strategy that you feel is one that you really like to work on, and then hash out the plan for that strategy. So hopefully that plan on board at the same time that we're doing budget, and we'll be able to identify the resources that we're going to need to move the strategic plan forward.
I do have a question on your wellness meetings. What are the health and wellness? What is the parental involvement? Do you have a lot of parents showing up?
Last fall we did, but right now it's been only Mrs. Everin. I send out a Connect Ed to, reminding families at least twice beforehand that we're having it, and they're not attending.
Can I make a suggestion? Because
Sure.
I see those emails, and I'm wondering if you include what your topic of discussion might be.
I
And
have
what-
been trying to include the agenda.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's as simple as, oh, that sounds really interesting, I want to go to that. And if they can make a connection with the topic and how it relates to their family, their student, their whatever, or that's happening to a family member or a friend, something that resonates, that gives people the motivation to want to attend another meeting. But my guess is that, especially on these concerns, when it comes to, anxiety or whatever it might be, there's going to be more attendance, if it's just more plainly stated. And the other thing, I do have a meeting set up with Kate for after the first of the year.
Awesome.
So I'm going to drill down into the mindfulness, how she just how it's more engaged in the schools, because I'd like to have a better idea of what the costs are, what what her program looks like, and
That's good.
bring it back to you
Thank
all.
you for doing that. So do you need anything from us tonight, or was this just
No, it's just
to
to
inform?
bring awareness
Okay.
to what the program is and what we're trying to do.
Great. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing this back. And it looks like we may have a broader interest in it than just those couple of grades that are mentioned here.
Yeah,
So
I think this is just gonna continue to evolve as we, keep trying to find the ways that we can help address this. I think it's gonna be definitely multifaceted, but, I think it's gonna take time, it's like you said, education. Sometimes it's uncomfortable to break a mold that's been created, but, in order to meet the kids' needs, we've gotta kind of think outside the box.
yeah.
So in a perfect world, what would this program look like to you?
For all the grades?
Yeah, I mean, just, on a high level, how would you like to see this implemented?
Well, I think trying to put my thoughts together.
I know, it's a big question.
It's a loaded question. No, but I mean, having all the staff involved, the parents involved, the kids involved, whether it's yoga in the classroom, movement exercises, having a part of the day where they can address these things in some capacity, whether it's reading a book, having some type of dialogue, whether it's through puppets for the young kids or some type of cooperative games. I know a child psychologist at South Hadley that I worked with years ago who works with my sons who did cooperative games with the kids, learning how to work with each other through these games that he did. Not being afraid to have the conversation at all ends of the table. You know, using the mindfulness moment when they have the moment of silence. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I see it more being a culture, creating a culture.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It's
than,
part of the teaching curriculum.
It's ingrained in everything that we do.
And that's how I envision
And that's
Peace
how-
Builders.
Right, and that's how
And
I
is that
feel
how
it should
Peace
be.
Builders is now operating?
I think it's moving in that direction, but when you talk about culture and you talk about peace builders and a culture of mindfulness and understanding our conflicts and our resolution, we're shifting from discipline and a discipline approach to, you know, let's understand some antecedent behaviors, let's collect data, let's see why a student may be behaving a certain way, and then see if we can prevent that from happening as opposed to discipline. And that's a culture, and we're working toward that, but it doesn't happen because we implement Peace Builders. It happens because teachers build trust amongst themselves, they have a common language, the kids become successful, and every experience they have moves the whole thing forward.
Well, and that's the Peace Builders Foundation, right?
Right.
It's giving everybody the same language to use.
And it's a proactive approach instead of reactive.
Right.
And it's, like Cheryl said, bringing everybody to the forefront, and everybody maybe not understanding it completely, but at least accepting that this is what we're going to try to do, and that we're going to be embedding this into everything that we do so that we can get the kids to be from here to here and just really be able to take flight. Because everything that they do, if it's coming from home, is affecting their ability to learn in the classroom. It really does. And their ability to cope through the day, you know, and then go home and do the process all over again the next day. How are we going to get them to be successful beyond these four walls that they're in? That character that we're striving the Granby graduate to be.
And I think what you said about coming from the culture change concept and building that environment, starting with those who are in the system, the teachers, the administrators, and all those, and getting those individuals to role model. The one thing that I remember from last conversation about mindfulness was about how Ms. Blackburn just stuck to it. She didn't care if, you know, everybody jumped in the first time, but she repeated, and eventually it takes hold. We need to, in any one of these things, not just for that, it will take a little while, and that's part of that shift, that culture shift. Everyone will see that it's part of how we do things, how we see things. It becomes it becomes us, and that's when we're going to be successful in these things. Any questions? Thank you very much for all this, and we're looking forward to hearing more. One question,
Yep.
since we have questions. I saw that there was something, I think, that was sent home, some stats. What is that? PNAS results for some grades.
Yes, we did. We initially did 8, 10, and 12, and then there were questions at the October meeting about grade 10 and how the trends from 8th grade when they did the survey in 2015 to this year.
Yeah.
And just the shift in dynamics, like you could see them improving in some areas, and then there were other areas that things kind of went up, but generally they seem to do better depending on what the area is. Some of it too, maybe just the age and experimenting and whatnot, but that was why that was included.
So I'm wondering if there may be some benefit eventually when you think that the data is representative of what trends we are seeing in this in our school. Maybe we can have a conversation around that. I think it was last year when Charlene and somebody else, I can't remember who it was.
Jessica Roy, maybe?
I think it was Jess. So when they came over and then they presented, it was really eye-opening.
Officer White too.
Hmm?
Wasn't it Officer White too?
I don't remember
I
who
believe so.
else was there. He might have been there too. Those are good things for not only for us to hear, but for everybody else who may be watching to hear, because then it just brings all these things that we're talking about together, because it's one piece of it, but that's a survey, and hopefully everybody's responding as honestly and as transparently as they can be. So it may be an interesting thing to hear for the committee as well.
Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nancy.
So, I did put a memo in your folder. An extension of the work that we're doing is at Granby Junior Senior High School is the TAB initiative, which is Training Active Bystanders. And this is a direct result of an analysis of some of the data around bullying in the schools. Mr. Sullivan certainly heard that as his entrance into the district, that there was concern about that. And so he reached out to the district attorney, Elizabeth Mulcahy, and she recommended the Quabbin Mediations Training Active Bystander Program. This is a program that is taught to students and teachers who then become train the trainer basically back in the district, and can work with students to help them become active bystanders. And by that, recognizing signals of bullying, recognizing what to do in a situation, recognizing their feelings, being helpful instead of passive and complicit. All of the things that our kids will say after the fact, in quiet conversation with a guidance counselor, with Officer White, I just didn't know what to do. And this is a program that Principal Sullivan feels and District Attorney recommended that could help provide some training and support to staff and students. It is partially funded through a grant through the DA's office, but we would need to match about $1,500. So my request to the committee would be to reach out to the finance for that special request, that this seems to be a perfect amount and a perfect topic, and reach out to them and see if they would be interested in funding it.
All right. Let's hope that that assumption is correct, based on our experience. But let's just, so that would be you reaching out to them
Yes.
with a letter with the request. Okay. And if
Yeah,
there is
Yeah.
if there is any need for a signature that may delay the process,
I'd be
please let
happy
me
to-
know, and I
yeah.
will.
Well, I think
I'll step
we
by.
should assume that there needs to be a signature
Yes.
based on what happened last
Yeah.
time, so.
Yes. So we'll yes, let's do that.
Okay, so,
Thank you.
all right.
So when we say train the trainer, do you know whether there's a initial number that's going to become future trainers, or is it for?
It is a small group
Okay.
that initially goes out. Approximately 20 students in grade 8 through 11 would attend the 3-day training. Really this also starts to develop your peer mediation program. So it's sort of a foundational step for us.
Cool. Thank you.
So does, I guess next year, so does next year's 8th graders start getting trained by the people who are in the program now? I just want to make sure that it's sustainable over
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
I agree, I think
Yep.
that's a concern I have too.
Yep. I think once the initial training is complete, I wouldn't be surprised if there were refresher trainings for people who are already trained. You know, this is an issue facing the Commonwealth, and there has been some state funding for these types of training programs to be developed, so.
My only comment would be my experience with Train the Trainer is only as good as the script.
Yeah.
Because every time you redo the training, something gets left out. So that's my only worldly thought on the matter.
Yeah.
That Train the Trainer is really only as good as the materials, and that the trainers are held to those standards for every single session. Because as it goes down, it can get watered down.
Agreed.
Seen it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've participated, unfortunately.
As you know, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else on tab? Good. Okay, so moving to old business. Did you want to go in this order, or is there
It's
any?
fine.
Okay. Let's talk about the strategic plan then.
I gave you a little bit of an update. The mission and vision were revised, and at the last meeting, we did come up with 4 tentative or draft strategies, and our next meeting is January 3rd, and we will be, as I said, hashing those out, formalizing the language, and pretty much wrapping up the plan for presentation to the school committee. So I'm excited.
Cool.
It was a
When
really
is the
good
next meeting?
January 3rd.
Okay. I should put it on my calendar. Cool. Any questions on the strategic plan?
No.
All right.
And social emotional learning as well.
Yeah, actually, those are good conversations. Also show that even though we sometimes feel like we're having these conversations in isolation, we're talking about this new direction and changing things. That's a pretty diverse group. From town, from the families, school,
Students, yeah.
students. Almost everyone, I think I would say everyone in that group, and this is a fairly large group, they are speaking in similar terms as far as where they would like to see the district go, and how we can set an example for certain things, and social emotional learning is one of those things. So I'm excited to see the final outcome of that. Did you want to do the AMCAS results
Well,
now?
Marie's not here. I don't know if we want to wait for a full board.
We already tabled it to.
Yeah.
We
To
tabled
today.
it for Jen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, last time we only had 3.
We only had 3,
people,
right.
Oh,
So.
gosh.
So yeah, we can do. Well,
Feels like
actually,
it's-
our friend's not feeling well.
Aw.
As Kathy is not feeling well either. So
Aw.
Kathy's
Okay.
not with us. So, would you mind if we took budget?
No, let's
course.
just
And
let's
then
take.
this will
Let's
take a little
take
bit of
budget.
time.
Thank you.
You're
And-
welcome. As you whip out your
Awesome.
toilet paper.
He's sitting between us. Let's get him out of
I
here.
know, I'm giving him space.
Thank you. So in your packet, you have the results of operations through December 14th. The budget is 37.1% expended, as we're 41% through the year. Other than our unbudgeted and unanticipated items that we have as separate requests, the budget is tracking according to plan. We have the budget now entered based on the voted line item budget from last time. There will be some adjusting and tweaking now that we have the budget entered. Obviously, there's some lines here that need to be some adjustments with funding. So I'll be working on those, and I'll bring those to the committee next month. Things like for instance, for SPED, we have everything placed in a district line, but it often gets expended by school. So we'll look at the historical budgets and divvy that out in terms of a budget. All the longevities are budgeted in salary, but they have separate lines in the budget, so we'll make those adjustments as well. So we'll be looking at the items that don't have budget lines, but have expenses on them, and look to adjust the budget for next time.
Mark, our run rate, you said 37 plus, is that what it is?
37.1%.
How are we comparing to, because last meeting we had a similar conversation when we realized that it was about 2% off this time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where we stand, a month later?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Where were we
time
last year?
Oh, where were we
this
last
time?
year? Hold on, let me take a look and I can get that.
Because last time you said 2016, same time we were around 30%, and we had 32%.
Yep.
Was it due to something that, that was different, or are we still a little faster than the normal pace?
I will, hold on, I will tell you FY17 through, and this won't be exact because that was at the end of the month, and this time I ran it halfway through the month because the last results we had, because our meeting was so late, it was basically all of November. It was November 29th, so there's no sense of me giving you all November's results when we're halfway through December. But let me just take a look and see. November 6. It's October, December. Where is November? Interesting. All right, I can run those and then get you them, because I've seen I have October results in December, so it doesn't look like November's in last year's folder, but I can run that and tell you what that is.
Another question is, as I'm very quickly looking at the balances,
Mm-hmm.
I see that there are some negatives.
Mm-hmm.
Some seem to be small, but all those small things add up eventually. And one of them is, it seems like a shift, contracted services, both lines, but there's a pretty large shift. Do you have a quick sense of what that may be that you can share with us?
Which
No, I mean, for the negatives. What should it tell us?
well, like I said, I think a lot of them is based on the fact that items are budgeted in one line but expended in more than one line. For example, that first admin contracted services. So I'll have to take a look and see what's being expended out of that, because all of the money is in the, if we look down, admin total management solutions. So it was all put under management solutions at 96,000, but our contract is not 96,000, so it needs to be broken out. And I believe the admin contracted services is Nancy, so her budget is combined, because in the budget we had one contracted services line for Nancy as a contracted service and for TMS, but it's actually broken out in this budget being expended out of two, so we need to break out the budget that way.
So when that type of shift happens, do you capture it somewhere? We had, let's say, for drinking water, bottled water, we had $100, and suddenly we realize that we're gonna need $200, so that goes to -100. Do we say, hey, you know what, we needed more water, and then know exactly why and where we shifted the amount? Or does it just happen, hey, there's more money here and let's just shift it there or here?
Well, generally, if there's more of an expense because we just spent more, I don't necessarily adjust funds for that, because that's something you want to know. We expended more money and why, and we should see it. For something like this, where it's a matter of we have the money budgeted, but we have it budgeted in one place and expending it somewhere else, that's where we want to do a shift. Like if there's a large known expense that we know we have to cover and we know we have funds for it, yeah, I'll go to school committee and say, okay, we're not going to spend this much on paper and we need this much for, whatever, some service or something like that. Yeah. So, but generally, no, because, expenses vary year to year. You might spend more one year than another, and if a line goes over or under because that's what you spent, well, that's what you spent. And then you take a look at it at the end of the year and decide, okay, I spent more here. Should I budget more next year because is this a trend or is this a one-time deal?
How do we know whether it's a trend or not? I personally don't recall that we ever looked year after year whether or not the same line items were shifting and therefore causing some of the negatives. And we talked about this during those several years that I mentioned as well. But I really have no idea. Let me just take a step back and explain why I'm going here. The way I am familiar with budgets and budgeting process, anything that is different, we have to explain, why it shifted, why it's different. That allows us to do two things. One is explain to the stakeholders or, folks who are wondering, finance committee that is probably just trying to understand why certain things are negative, positive, whatever it is. It allows us to tell the story of why those shifts are happening. The second thing is the trending, and we were never able to really get to that level where, during the budget process, we could say, you know what, looks like the last 3 years we were putting insufficient amount of money in this line, and we're shifting that amount to somewhere else. I mean, maybe you can see that somewhere, but we were never able to really see that. That's why I'm wondering whether there's a way for us, either by having a column that says this shifted somewhere, or saying, hey, you know, the last so many years, this contracted services line, because you're right, we put some amount there, and we know for a fact as we sit here that amount wasn't enough, right? But did we know it before, or did it happen the same way last year? Is there a reason for it? Is it because 2 fiscal years are coming together at one point and causing some? I have no idea. I have no idea. And we start having these conversations too late in the year, and we don't have time to focus. If we can get there now, at least it would give us some idea as to whether next year we should put more or less in some of those items.
Well, one of the things we can do, first of all, yeah, if there's something that goes over or under and it's unexpected, the first thing I do is look at the detail. What did we spend it on, and was this a typical expense, or is it something that was a one-time thing for this year? And sometimes that means looking back into last year to say, what did we buy last year, and what did we buy this year, and why do we have such a difference? The other thing I've been doing through the course of the year, which we'll use when we start budgeting, is just kind of building the historical expenditures over the last 3 years, so that as we look at FY19, we've got 16, 17, and 18 behind us that we can say, okay, this is what we spent. And sometimes, like Cheryl and I were looking at that when we were looking at the tech contracted services budget in terms of well, what's the amount for this year? Well, that one's wild. I mean, it's up 1 year, it's down 1 year. I mean, some of them are trend very steadily, and some of them are just your expenses vary based on what you have to do that year. So, I mean, to the degree that you can, you try to trend it out, and then we'll make adjustments for FY19 budget. Some of those items, though, are just going to be, this is our best guess. This is what the stuff we need to think we're going to buy. Because if we look back historically, we're not going to see necessarily a very steady trend on it. But most stuff, I think we would.
Okay. Well, that's good if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, because I sometimes get the impression that during the course of the year, we say there's this much extra here on this line item, and let's take that and put it somewhere where we have some deficit going on. And that may make those deficits that are important, or surpluses that are important to us to make a decision on the budget, disappear. Because now we're basically plugging things in to balance those lines. So if you have a way to actually capture those through the course of the year, even though when it comes to us eventually towards the end of the year, everything seems to be balanced because you guys are moving things around, that's good. Then it would be good to see those as we're budgeting things.
Well, and I mean, I'm not afraid to have negatives. I mean, I'm afraid to have a negative bottom line, but I mean, negatives and positives tell a story as to what's happening in that line.
But we don't have that story. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I don't know what the story is. I don't know whether, we have too many pencils, or everybody's using the same pencil for 10 classes. I have no idea.
So I guess the question, maybe the way I'm hearing it, is, are we tracking the shifting that you're doing, or is there a way we can track the shifting you're doing? Because maybe the place we're putting it at the beginning of the year isn't the right place. Do we need to look at that too, I guess is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if there's shifting, it's going to go to school committee. We don't arbitrarily just move line items around the budget, so you're going to know about it. And if we're going to do transfers, there's going to be a reason for them, which you're going to get as well. And we'll of course keep a history of those as well.
That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the answer to your question is yes. It's just that you're not bringing back every shift and transfer here and there to the school committee. And that for the budget, for the larger budget, it's used as part of the decision-making process and what comes forth to the school committee as needed.
I mean, if we make the determination that yes, we need to shift money between lines, then we'll go to school committee.
Right.
For what amount?
Really, I don't think you have a dollar amount set.
I think we do have a dollar amount set.
Yeah.
We set that, and that's where I'm going with this. I mean,
I don't think
there are a few $100s. And then we have, and this is, salary line, but, then I would like to know what that means, right? 17,000 plus shifting somewhere. And I always go for the larger numbers. Sped tuition at risk, $472,000 negative showing there. I have no idea what that means. And that is way beyond the amount that we discussed and agreed to. That would be, the first part would be the superintendent's purview, then it would come to the school committee. I have no idea what that amount is, why it's shifting, why it's negative. There is, the initial one that I mentioned to you was, I think, about $155,000 somewhere for contracted services. I just made an assumption that it's right here. Contracted services, $155,000 negative somewhere. There is a similar amount somewhere else. I was wondering whether there were just, shift from regular line to sped line or vice versa, but I don't know what it is. And eventually these questions accumulate and we get to the end of the year without really understanding why these shifts are occurring. That's what I'm saying. Otherwise, yes, shifts will happen. We understood that. From your perspective, it's accounting. From our perspective, it's really understanding what the narrative is going to be so that we can make those decisions based on good information. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll come to you with the transfer for that with an explanation, and that is, I forget what Carol calls that. It's the in-house services, the whole 155, that contracted service.
That is,
I forget what she calls it, but
the social emotional learning program collaboration.
so that.
I forgot our partners.
Right, and so that's the contracted amount. It's in contracted services. It's being expended out of contracted services special ed. So that's a line I'll move, and I'll tell you that when it was put in the budget, it was put in that line, and it should be in the other. And I'll also tell you when I bring the transfers, well, this is really a reclass, but your question about the sped tuitions is, at the time, all the contracts were put in there and the 240 grant wasn't approved. The 240 grant's now approved, so we need to reclass some of those purchase orders out of the tuition line and put them in the 240 grant, because there's over $200,000 in there that is earmarked to pay for those tuitions. So it's still going to be over budget, but it's not going to be over budget by over $400,000.
So can we at least have that at that summary level? So much was reclassed, and that's why we're seeing these.
Sure.
So much is because the funds were insufficient, and we put it there. Otherwise we have to look at these things line by line. And the first time we did it, it was interesting because it also allows us to understand what these different line items are, but it was a few years ago. Now it becomes almost a chore to go line by line and trying to decipher what's going on. So if you can help us with that, that would be great, because as I said, one part is accounting, the other side is really important for the budgeting process. And if anybody comes and asks the same questions, and I'm not an accountant, I don't really go into this type of detail for things that I do elsewhere. Just, I see summary lines, but I have no problem going into this either. But if I can't understand this, I can't explain it. And that becomes a concern, more and more so. Not that it wasn't before, but now that we're talking about all these different things that we'd like to focus on, at least we should be able to explain what these mean. The 155 is probably what you're saying. It's going to be shifting around, but if things are changing at the magnitude of, I don't know what the numbers that we set out in our policy were exactly, but if it's 10,000 plus, we should at least have an understanding as to what it is and have that discussion,
Sure.
with the committee.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree. And like I said, this is kind of the first cut because the budget was just entered, so now we have a look-see as, okay, this was the budget, this was the anticipated place we were going to expend out of, now this is what's actually happening, so what adjustments do we have to make? And I mean, and there's some, and part of the issue here too is, Granby tends to use this budget like a filing cabinet. Like rather than having that standard line for like say maintenance, general maintenance, it gets broken out into 10 different expenditures, plumbing, this, that, which really shouldn't, but that's what's happening, and I can't seem to stop it. So maybe we just budget for those line items because The tendency is to try to class all these expenses in the specific lines that we have, which isn't necessarily the way you want to do it, but it's going to create some negatives because, when we budget $41,000 for maintenance, we don't budget $273 for plumbing supplies because it's just not reasonable.
Right. So I don't know if I understood exactly what you mean by that, but if you think that there's a better way of doing this, I think we're looking to you, I say you, just to TMS to bring those suggestions to us so that we can find that better way of budgeting, understanding, analyzing, whatever it might be. Just because we've done it that way for so long doesn't mean anything to me, at the very least, but I don't think it means anything to the rest of the committee either. We want to find the best way to do this, and if you have suggestions, we're all open to those suggestions.
Okay.
Are we done with FY17, or is it just?
I emailed Kathy while this meeting started and said, please take it off the agenda. I'm like,
Okay, good. All right, that's good. Anything else on 18 that you wanted to?
No, the only other thing I will say is the Title I and Title II rollovers for FY17 were recently approved by DESI within the last 2 weeks or so.
Yep.
So we have about $1,200 left in Title I and about $4,400 in Title II that's planned for this budget, and that's been approved. So we'll be setting up lines and expending out of those lines for FY18.
Okay. So the grants are on track, or is there any gap?
Nope, grants are on track right now.
Good. Anything else, or should I jump on my next thing?
Your next thing in what, finance?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
looking
go
at it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's where I
right.
figured we were going.
Can we just invite Andrew here?
Well, I thought that's what
Yeah,
we were
wasn't it
gonna
recorded?
do, but we haven't seen them this year, did we?
They're due.
They
Yeah.
are-
And it seems to me that bottom line may have something to do with it. That
Well, if you look at it, and you took it off the loss right now, we'd be what, $351 in the hole?
Where
That
do you see that?
deviation, right? The deviation of 1,300 food loss from the freezer,
Yeah,
right? Now,
but
if
the
you
year-to-date there are.
If you subtracted that from the loss now,
Yeah.
we'd be in the hole $351 as opposed to the $1,651.
Oh, you're talking about for the month of November.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the year-to-date, and that's now at 4,100 or whatever that is.
Yeah, I talked to Andrew about this a little bit, and I mean, he will come in to the next school committee. A good chunk of that is due to enrollment because there's now 74 less kids enrolled in buying food. So, and I know he's trying to trim costs, and one of the things that he did was the bookkeeper, which was a full-time position, is now a part-time position. So, and that happened in November because they hired someone new. So the labor costs are going to go down, and he's hoping that that's going to help contribute to trimming this deficit and getting it going the other way. And the other thing is November is a bit of a short month because you got Thanksgiving in there, so that's it's not always going to be a great month anyway. But we can have him come in here and speak to these issues and whatever questions you have. I did look into the whether we could have any reimbursement for that $1,300, and I did check, and the town policy actually does cover mechanical breakdowns, so there would be coverage for those. However, there's a $1,000 deductible, and those are two separate losses. So for the $1,300 combined for the two of them, I mean, it wouldn't even be worthwhile. We wouldn't get any money back after the deductible.
All right, so that's one of those. insurance for no good reason whatsoever case.
Well, I mean,
You know.
being an old insurance guy, the deductible is to prevent nuisance losses like $1,000. When you lose $20,000 worth of food, you definitely want to put in a claim. But
For sure.
So
Yeah.
so the overage is really just the overhead?
well, yeah, it's basically sales and the expenses that it costs to buy and produce the food.
Well, that was gonna be my next question. If what you're selling, if you're not selling as much of, you wouldn't buy as much of, I would have thought, right? So,
Yeah, and
It's
in the
true,
case
but
of
there's a certain amount of fixed costs as the number of meals you make or less. You can only go so far before you can reduce a staff member or
right, so that goes back to the overhead costs, like, you still have to pay the cooks, the people doing the dishes, the whatever.
right.
Okay.
Let me see if it is here. The participation rate seems to be slightly higher in the high school, East Meadow, and West Street.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's dipped a little bit from last month and last year at the high school. It's 60, 62, 60 for East Meadow. West Street seems to be up because it's 67% for the month. And
But
it's
I'm looking at the
58
year
for
to date. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
the
looking
month
at
of
the
November
Yeah.
is month of November, but I'm looking year to date. So I'm seeing that there's an increase in the percentages. So this whole narrative around enrollment, when something happens unexpectedly, all good. It's just like the conversation we had. We just open up parentheses and then we explain it. In this case, that's almost no news right now. I mean, the declining enrollment, and given that out of those 70 decline, the percentage that we were expecting, if you go simple linear math and not no other assumption, about 50-60% of those students would be, so it even reduces the number to a more manageable level. But when I look at the participation is going up. Our deficit is growing larger too compared to last year. So I don't know how the whole thing comes together to to add up to that extra
It's
deficit that we're
participation
seeing.
of the current student base, though.
Yeah.
It's not
So your
participation.
denominator is smaller, so
Yeah.
you may have a higher
Doesn't matter.
percentage,
You
but less
budget based
kids.
on what assumptions you make. They didn't make this. They didn't make their budget based on last year's enrollment, right? They made it based on this year's enrollment. And if based on this year's enrollment they had a number and the participation is going up, I would expect that those numbers would actually improve. If it is the case that they are basing this year's this year's budget based on last year's, then there's a problem there too.
Well, that's my guess. That they weren't basing their numbers on this year's assumption. They were not basing their numbers on the fact that the enrollment rate went down by 75 students, or 74 students.
So you're thinking they're not accounting for that when
That's
they are.
my guess, because
Well, that-
otherwise the math doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that they did not anticipate a 74 student drop, although the student population has been dropping every year, so you would think that they'd be able to make an assumption based on past years.
I think they did to a degree, and I mean that's something obviously we can ask Andrew when he comes here. But I mean, if you remember, their break even increased because it was based on less participation. The $10,000 became $16,000 because they were anticipating less participation because there were less students. So was it 74 students exactly? I don't know, but I know they were anticipating less enrollment.
Well, this is a really good discussion to have with somebody, from their establishment.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
instead
we
of
had
us
established
making
that cadence that
assumptions
every
and-
2 months
yeah.
we were gonna have this face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, or quarterly. I mean, I think we missed. We probably should have had them in October and then in December. So we'll
Right.
bring them in next month.
So what was the difference in that, the bookkeeper rate from full-time to part-time? Is that gonna be enough to help offset some of this, or?
I'll have to talk to Andrew and get the specificity from him, because I was just, once I got the results today, I was asking him about it, and that was one of the items that he's using as an offset. So I'll have to get. I don't know what they pay her. So because she's a Chartwell's employee, but I can get some information on that.
Okay, I think I'm just trying to figure out if that's going to be a big enough cut to really see anything by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's also benefits, though, because going from full-time to part-time, they're also, it's going to be the difference in salary, but there's also going to be benefit reduction, too.
The adult, do you know what adult meal is? Is that teachers and staff and all that stuff? That, I don't know if that's dramatic, but that seems to be declining as well. I wonder why. I mean, that would be something good to know as well, if they are including that in their budget. So in terms of total meals, there's a 2,000, less than 2,000 actual difference. But honestly, I have no idea. Sometimes I'm so tempted to ask all these questions and understand exactly what their assumptions are, because that I'm all good for that. I can spend the whole day on it. Then I'm thinking, should it really be our job to question every single line, or trust the services that we're getting and be able to discuss what's really important?
My vote is for that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, all right.
Well, at least you know the direction we're heading in for when they show up.
Yeah.
And, some preparation with maybe some of these questions in mind would be really helpful.
I'm going to email him right now.
All right. Anything else on the budget?
That's it.
Yeah. Well, feel better.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good night.
I'm just going to fill
Good night.
this.
Thank you.
Make yourself a little hot toddy.
Right.
Do we have anything to discuss on the consent agenda, or are you going to? Yeah.
So the consent agenda, if you look in your folder, there is a folder for the consent agenda. We did build
okay.
one, Kathy and I, just so you could see what it would look like. So it would be a call to order, and then the consent agenda would detail the items that, should you
It's
approve.
on top of the shared items on the drive.
No?
If you go to shared with me and then go to the folder for today, it's on top of the page.
So just the first thing that pops out of my head is,
It's own
if we have
folder.
three of these agendas, would we be able to vote on them as a block even if somebody wasn't here for those agendas? Like, would
Yes.
that still be a valid
Yep.
vote? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
And so if there were corrections, you would remove the item from the consent agenda,
Yep.
okay? I think one of the things that would help the consent agenda move would be to make sure that it was in your folders by Monday as opposed to Thursday, because you're gonna need more time to go over.
Yes.
There are larger things in there, like policy. So that would mean, Emery, we would have to talk earlier either later in the week in between, so that we could get that, at least that part of the agenda up.
Yep.
For folks to review.
Okay, so if I understand this, you would have, prior to each meeting, us going into this consent agenda to look at,
All of the items, and if you had no question, concern, and did not want to have any discussion, that all of those items would be approved with one vote.
okay, and these would just be more,
Tasky, managerial.
okay.
Like
However,
field trips and
yeah,
minutes
yeah.
and
Okay.
like.
If you had a
things like-
question, you could email Emery and say, I have a question about this agenda item, and you could ask for it to be removed out of the consent agenda and moved into discussion.
And what if I had a simpler question that didn't need to
So
be?
part two is, I think, as we get comfortable with the consent agenda, if you have a clarifying question and you felt comfortable calling or emailing and I can give you an answer, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding of consent agenda is not that folks lose complete control over what's in those. It has to be really agreeable to everybody. It's just that we package it in such a way that we don't have to go item by item and say, you know, we're voting for this, we're voting for that. So, for instance, today, and that's a good example of that because we don't have much that would fit in that consent agenda. Today it would have been all minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, do you want to vote for November 6th and November 28th, it would have been, hey, you know, all the minutes from November 6th, 28th, anything? No, all good. If there's more, then we vote for all that in that package.
And you're gonna split it out by date, right?
Yeah.
So consent agenda, it's gonna be very clearly demarcated that it's for the meeting on 12/18 or 1, whatever it is. Because I don't wanna be hunting for this
Nope.
stuff.
Right.
So every meeting date will have a consent agenda folder.
Okay.
And everything that would be voted on in the consent agenda would be found in that folder.
And you're gonna have it out there
Perfect.
before the weekend of,
Correct. So
before the meeting,
we would,
right?
so I think it would be helpful to have it to you by Monday, so you have the entire week and the weekend.
Okay.
Oh, that would be,
Which just means that we need to talk before Wednesday. We need to probably talk the Thursday, so
Right.
today's Monday, we need to talk on Thursday and Friday to make sure that everything
last
that's.
Thursday and Friday.
I'm talking about for our next meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so for our next meeting this week, Emery and I would talk about what goes in the consent agenda and make sure that it was up for you by Monday, so that by the following Monday. So that, what it does is it gives you a little time to pick up the phone and call or email. Just have a quick question about what that is. Yep.
And what is your preferred method of communication if I have clarifying questions?
I've done either. I think email is helpful because what I will do is you will send me the email, I'll cut it and paste it into the body, and then I'll answer in a different color.
Okay.
I have a question, and we had, I believe, this conversation a couple of years ago. Then, you know, we didn't get it. We didn't change directions. It's related to these.
Yes.
I may be misreading this when I look at some other school committees' agenda. It seems like this kind of stuff is part of their consent agenda as well.
Yeah.
And the whole committee actually has visibility into it. They review it and they
Right.
can ask questions or they can approve it. In our case, we are actually approving it in a way, but we're again doing it individually. We're signing on it without really making it part of an official agenda. Do you have any idea or suggestions
I've
on?
seen it both ways. You know, I don't really have preference or an understanding of why one is done one way and why one is done another. I think in the larger districts, it's more formal, so it's actually part of the agenda. But
Okay.
I can
Alright.
look into it.
But if that should be included in the consent agenda, we can do that too. So it would be.
Yep.
But doesn't somebody have to sign it?
Yeah, eventually three committee members, but that's our quorum. So at least 3 committee members sign that document. So it depends on. I usually, I always sign. I'm one of the signatures, but the other 2 depends on who happens to see it first and then sign off on it. Instead, we can just say, hey, you know, does the school committee have any questions? Agree to the whole thing, make it part of consent. Still have to sign off on it. But it doesn't have to be the random 3 people's review of it. And to be very honest, only about a little more than 2 years ago that I started going through, you know, what does this really mean? I mean, it's salaries and grants and all that, but what does it mean? And there are sometimes I bump into things that I don't understand, so I ask questions and try to understand. It would be good to have additional eyes for some of the stuff. We're not a big district, so hopefully it will not add a lot of work to everyone. Just a suggestion. We may be able to do that. Anything else on that? Any questions on consent?
So we're moving to consent agenda
Yes.
Okay.
for the next meeting.
So for the good. Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do it next year. So what's the thought on MCAS? Are we doing it tonight? How long do you think it would be?
It's probably a good 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, good. Let's do it.
10 minutes,
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, because I've read these, and that's my first question.
Yeah,
First
put it here
favorite.
before 8, right?
Is there
Well, that's a good question. I didn't
recommend
look to see.
that I can borrow, please?
And it's not that solid to be recommended as much as I can do.
Thank you.
Might jar something loose.
Well,
All right, so this is a little bit of an opportunity.
one is a format difference. The other one I don't know what it is.
To share with the community and with the committee some changes to MCAS that have occurred over the past couple of years. There is a new MCAS, and over the past few years there had been much discussion about PARC and MCAS and moving to PARC and then moving away. So what we have now is Massachusetts set high learning standards of what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. And that originally MCAS was developed to measure how well students understood what was being taught. So the taught curriculum in classrooms was what MCAS was measuring. It was used to identify areas of improvement at the district and the school and at student levels, and it played an important role in student achievement gains over the past 2 decades. So you saw that students performed better and better on the legacy MCAS or the old MCAS. And then there was a desire not to just measure what students were taught, but are they actually ready to be successful in their next steps. So next generation MCAS was developed. PARC was sort of an interim step. And next generation MCAS will be measuring learning expectations that take into account changes in learning progressions in mathematics and interplay amongst text complexity. So it isn't just content, this is actually how kids are thinking about reading, writing, and progressions in mathematics. And in order to document, are students going to be prepared and ready for the next steps in their academic and work career? And eventually, next generation MCAS will be computer-based 100%. And so that's something that Granby needs to pay attention to as we move towards having all of our students have access.
Do you know what the timeline is on that one? Is it here?
I believe it is in 2019.
Right.
Yep, requirement for the class.
Through the class of 2019, so that means
No, that-
September 2019?
That's just for, that's just the graduating requirement. So that's a different, date. It's a different category. But it's a good question, I will find out. I know that we applied for a waiver, last year, because we could not get all of our students on 100%, and we were awarded that waiver. And I believe this year, with David converting the laptops that were donated to Chromebooks, I believe we'll be able to be 100% online. But that may require some infrastructure on this side.
Well,
Of course.
Obviously, you know, this is playing ground for those folks. Now they're making it look like PARC was, we were just having a conversation. PARC was the direction.
Of course
right?
it was, yes.
So we're gonna do
Yep.
PARC, then Now we're calling it MCAS 2.0, but really nothing in essence seems to have changed until they explain us or show us that something has changed. That's fine. The computer is one of the critical changes.
One of the critical changes, yep.
And there were two ways of doing it when they first introduced that with Park. One was you're online, you're well equipped, everybody sits down, they take their thing, and then everything is captured somewhere on a server. If you can't do that, then they said you can do it locally. You capture it on this server, there was a program for it.
Yep.
But something happened as we were doing it the first time, and the computer's blocked.
Yes.
So they had to stop
They
that
couldn't
one. And,
cache.
yeah.
Yep.
So there's a challenge there, and if we're having the challenge, I can't imagine other school districts to our west, further west, not having similar challenges. So it may be something that we discuss later on.
So those are some of the details of the focus for next generation MCAS,
Yeah.
which is content, rewriting of the frameworks, really looking at more how kids are writing in response to text at all grade levels, developing and implementing new types of items that more deeply assess the standards. And then also, one of the reasons to move away from Park was because Park did not assess Massachusetts-specific standards. And so that's why Next Generation, one of the main reasons that Next Generation MCAS was developed, it was so that Massachusetts didn't lose its status as some of the most rigorous standards for students in the United States. So in a nutshell, the difference between the legacy and the next generation is that next generation focuses students' critical thinking abilities, application of knowledge, and the ability to make connections between reading and writing, and it gives a clear signal of readiness for the next grade level or college and career. So you're not going to hear things like, oh, my child was proficient or exemplary. You're going to hear things like meets expectation, exceeds expectation, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So the scoring differences, we can't really see them, I apologize. So in legacy, it was
Cheryl,
advanced.
Quickly,
Yes.
Do the years remain the same where they administered the tests?
Yes.
That's correct one. Okay.
Yep. So we had, in legacy, we had advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. And these were, again, related to content and subject matter. Whereas now with next generation, we have exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and not meeting expectations. So if a student is meeting expectations, the student that performed at this grade level met grade level expectations and is academically on track to succeed in the current grade in this subject and is prepared for the next, and is on track to be successful in the next level. You can't see the red, I apologize, I didn't realize it wouldn't come up, but if a student is partially meeting expectation, in red it says that the school in consultation with the student's parent guardian should consider whether the student needs additional academic assistance to succeed in this subject. So students who are partially meeting expectation may get small group instruction, teachers may provide extra lessons for groups of students, they may work with students individually, they may work with our interventionists, but those are the signals that students may need more help.
And how is it not that in the legacy? I mean, to me, I'm seeing a language difference. I'm not seeing a big difference.
So I would have to actually show you questions in order to see how do you test someone's, how do you test a student's ability to think critically about text? So for example, in the legacy MCAS, it might have been a single text, and the questions might have been, why does the author use this word choice? It might be, explain what happened to the main character in this text. Critical thinking is more about maybe the students now are getting two texts and have to compare and contrast two sets of characters and think critically about why the authors chose certain character traits for each of the each of the stories. How are they similar? How are they different? And that's getting students to respond to multiple texts at the same time. So thinking critically is really about not just stating what's on the page and what you know is there, but it's making connections. It may be making connections to your experience or to your knowledge of the world. It's using logic and understanding an author's logic and an argument and writing about that. And those are all things that are going to set students up to be more successful. And, you know, frankly, there are some students that do that naturally really well, but there are some students that need to be taught the strategies around thinking critically about text or the progressions in mathematics, understanding how to reason through a problem. But those are all things that need to be taught, and we're going to have to work on our curriculum to make sure that we're embedding those lessons into the students' daily activities.
So my initial thought is, it seems as though this generation of MCAS is more in line with our vision
Yeah.
and mission of our district.
Right.
Just on the outset, in theory.
And I think it's what teachers have been saying all along, is that we can get really good at teaching content and teaching to the test, but that's not what kids need. Kids need to be able to think critically, they need to be able to problem solve, they need to be able to collaborate, they need to be able to see patterns. All of those things, those are the things that we should be having, those are the things that we should be testing.
So my sense is that you're in favor of this next generation of MCAS,
Yeah.
comparatively speaking.
Yes. Okay, so, in Granby, all students except grade 10 students participated in Next Generation. And in Massachusetts and in Granby, students may only partially meet expectations when participating in Next Generation MCAS as opposed to scoring proficient in prior testing years. In general, the standards for meeting expectations are more rigorous. And when MCAS first came out, I don't know if you remember this, there were very few kids who were proficient or advanced, and they had to sort of relook at their scoring and sort of figure that out. So we're in that phase of only the second year of Next Generation. There were pilot year, and then last year where there was a majority of Next Generation MCAS. Massachusetts educators have set the new standards to help signal students' readiness for the next grade level. So we may have been doing a really good job getting kids proficient and advanced, but that didn't necessarily translate into the new standards so that students are ready for the next grade level. And again, last year was the baseline in grades 3 through 8. Are those our wrestlers? And so for parents who received their scores and are noticing that their students are maybe not fully meeting or partially meeting expectations, it doesn't mean that the students learned less. It just meant that MCAS, the new Next Generation MCAS, measured in a different way and different things. 2017 is a learning year. It's a baseline year for us.
Were parents given the heads up prior to the test results coming out?
It was in a letter that went home.
Okay, because that was going to be my question too. Was
Yeah,
this
it came
information
like-
given to parents?
Yeah, and when we got our results, there's a whole letter explaining that this is a new test and
Because I
all the
would've-
rules
I
around
would've
it. It was
freaked
pretty
out if I
clear.
got-
Yeah.
Without knowing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was pretty clear, and I think even on the page with the results, there was something on there about it.
Okay.
So.
In general, this is from DESE, in some grades, grade 4 English Language Arts, math, grade 7 math, the percent of students meeting expectations will likely be similar to percent that were proficient, but in other grades, grade 8 English Language Arts, the percent that are meeting expectations will likely be lower, because educators that created and scored recognized that 8th grade needed to be more rigorous in English Language Arts, and so we're likely going to see lower scores there.
So the educators had input into this.
Yes.
But we set the new standard in such a way that they are telling us the grades may go down, which to me says that we're not really giving the students what we thought we should.
I think it's just
Yeah, I think that's,
transitory, yeah.
Is that what it is?
I do.
Okay.
I think there's a recognition that we got as educators, we got very good at teaching the legacy MCAS. We got very good at teaching open response. We got very good at teaching the essay as the long composition, and that there was recognition that those aren't necessarily the skills that are going to prepare students to be successful.
Well, just as a sideline, parents have known that for
Forever.
years.
Oh, yeah. Most of the teachers have as well.
You know, this is something
yeah.
that we, you know, openly
Yes.
talked about,
Yes.
that, you know,
Yeah.
all we're doing is teaching to a test,
Yeah.
and, you know,
Yeah.
the kids are really good at test taking.
So, in our performance in grades 3 through 8, on the left, you have English Language Arts for Granby, and on the right, you have the state. And that's average. So you can see we don't have quite as many students in not meeting expectation as compared, and more of our students end up in partially meeting expectation. So our work will be around looking at why that is, looking at curriculum, looking at student work, and then addressing lessons and units around making sure that we are meeting the new standards.
Well, to be honest with you, I thought the scores were gonna be worse.
Just hold on. This is 3 through 8, and remember that grade 10 took legacy and will continue to take legacy as their exit, as their standardized test. So on the top, you have grade 3 reading and state reading, and then grade 3 math and state math. So I'm just gonna go through these. They're all the same. Reading will be on the top. Granby will be on the left. The state will be on the right, and math will be on the bottom. This is grade 4. So obviously a concern for us is no exceeding expectation, which would lead us to the question of how are we differentiating for some of our students who may be already at grade level? You know, how are we extending their activities? How are we extending their learning and addressing?
I'm not sure how much of a concern, this is new MCAS, right?
Yes.
Next generation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of a concern that should be, that we don't have, or how much of an advantage it is that,
Yeah,
you know, some
just a
folks have.
question.
Because, again, the previous slides acknowledge that we say we're not there yet.
Right.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
If we're not there yet, even those people who put it together
Right.
don't believe that, you know,
Yeah,
we have it.
You know, for me, it is more about, this could be one indication that if we have students that are meeting expectation already, why are they not exceeding expectation? So is there something in our curriculum, is there something in our lesson and our delivery that isn't allowing students to maybe go further than they could be? And it's really, what this allows us to do is just ask. It allows us to ask the questions, We can get in and do individual student scores and look at where students were successful, where they struggled, and we can look at their student responses as well. So we can work together at the grade levels and then between grade levels to talk about units of instruction that could ensure that we are meeting these new standards.
So I went through these last night, and for the most part, it looked like they were pretty close. Like, the question is like, what's the next step to take us to the next level, right?
Yeah.
And there was a couple of grades that looked like
Yeah.
they needed more than one quick step to get there.
Yep. So again, you say, oh, you know, that no exceeding expectations in one grade, now it's in 2 grades. You know, that's just a question. It's just a question. It's not a judgment. It's more about what is the data telling us, and we have to get more into the data. And so to your point, what are we doing? This is grade 8.
Can you go back 2 slides to the first one? This is 3, grade 3, is that what it is?
This
This
is
is
grade
6, 5, 4, 3.
3. So, can you go to the next one?
So on a positive, we would ask, you know, why are there no students in not meeting expectation in grade 3 for reading? That's
Right.
incredible. Like, okay, what are we doing there that's really successful? 4, you wanted 5?
So yep. It's 5.
Mm-hmm.
See, that one on the bottom was one of the ones that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bigger disconnect there.
Yep.
than Some of the other ones.
So the next one is 6.
Mm-hmm.
So this is interesting, isn't it? That I think grade 5 for math
Yeah.
was the lowest, and then
Mhm.
suddenly, boom, we
Yep.
go to 6.
Yeah.
And then it
Yep.
just
Mhm.
jumps up and goes beyond the stigma.
And if you look at the student growth in grade 6 is very high, but it's relative to the fact that they tested poorly in grade 5. So, you know, it's yeah, it is just something that we need to look at. We need to take a deeper dive into.
This is 7.
And then that was another one of the ones that.
Because this is brand new, they can't really look at past year's
Right.
performance and
No, they can't.
adjust.
Right. So what are we doing? So in general, you can see this does include the student growth percentiles on the right, on that SGP. And when you're looking at student growth percentiles, you're looking for 40 to 60 is the band that you want to be in. So, you know, you guys noticed that grade 7, that student growth percentile is very low, the 29 and 11.5. You know, that's a concern because compared to other students that tested like them the year before, they didn't keep pace, is basically what that's saying. So that's something to take a look at.
Well, grade, honestly, grade 8 is not doing.
No, in grade 8 is
No,
another one
and
to look
it
at.
seems to be
Yep.
more concentrated in the grade 7 and 8
Yep.
for
Yeah, for
whatever
and
reasons.
we don't know that reason.
Right,
You
right.
know, and that's something
Well,
that,
there's a lot of other things going on in those grades.
oh, absolutely.
Other than,
Yep. Yep.
It's also
Grade 6
physical move
mathematics
for
is
the
just
kids.
Yep.
6 to 7.
Yep.
to get burned out in grade 6. And the mathematics, that's at what, 79?
Yeah.
So what do we do with the results? So we look for trends in the data. So what you have is an item by item result for grade 3 reading. we can get that for every single one of the grade levels and tests. So we would be looking at identifying questions that we have large discrepancies between the state average, just to understand why our students maybe didn't do as well. Did they not understand the question? Was their vocabulary? Did we not teach it? Which often can happen. It's not in our curriculum until after the test is given. So all of those things we talk about in grade level and content meetings. It helps us understand discrepancies and analyze the curriculum. It helps us deconstruct the standard and reflect on instruction that we provide specific to the standard. So let's say, I'm trying to find a good example of one. So question number 12, we outperformed the state average, it looks like. Oh no, I'm sorry. We underperformed the state average in question number 12. So if you look, question number 12 is the last one, and it is a standard relative to, it's our essay. So in the essay, explains how a person described in the passage helped others and used information from the passage as evidence. So our students, we'd have to look at their essays and say, can they describe the character, but then can they not give evidence? Is that where they're losing points? And so as we look at student work, we can start to ensure that our students are in fact using evidence from the text to support their thinking. And we may not have been doing that because it hasn't been part of our repertoire.
That's tedious work. Determining. You do? That's. I'm not saying tedious as a negative thing. I'm saying tedious as, I mean, that's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have a working group that does that? How do you
so
go
our
about
hours,
this?
Yep, our hours of power and our faculty meetings all revolve now around taking a look at the data and asking these kinds of questions. Absolutely. Yep.
And have you come up to any working theories yet?
Nope, not yet.
But you will.
And this level of, I'm sorry, Dee, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you will bring those interesting conclusions to us, right?
And again, when we talk about culture and climate, we talk about being able to look at data and use it to inform instruction, and not as a club or a hammer. Again, it's not judgment, it's just questions. I wonder why. And then we can start to think about, the standard. How did I teach that standard? How did I get my reluctant learners to engage in that standard? How did I get my kids who already can write an essay, how did I get them to use more evidence or to explain their evidence more clearly? Like, it becomes really, how do I teach every single one of the students in my classroom where they're at? And those are the very powerful questions, because then you get to see what each student is doing and how I can support each student, as opposed to, here's the standard, here's the benchmark, if you can all do this, you're great. It's grade level. And that's not, we want every student, every classroom, every day to be really confident learners, that every day they walk in, they're going to learn something that they didn't know.
And I think that every student thing is the important part. And I'm not sure that it's happening in most classrooms, and this is not just Granby.
Right.
Well, that's complicated.
It is complicated.
That is very
And these tests
complicated.
don't tell us anything about that either.
Yeah.
It just says, you know what, grade 3, currently your essays are not really at the level we're expecting. But it doesn't tell us where we are or where each student is in terms of their ability to write. We know that some of them are going to be way up here, but how do I find those that are down here? That's going to happen in the classroom.
Well, and that's when we start talking about, do we have an assessment system that is in addition to MCAS that's from Granby, that throughout time measures what we know students need to know and be able to do. So do we have writing samples throughout the year 4 times a year, 3 times a year, whatever that is, so that we're actually having the students do these writing assignments and then sitting as teachers around the table and looking at the work they're producing and saying, 4 of my kids are not at all getting how to give evidence. They can't even find the evidence. They can't find the evidence. So if, let's say it's a 5th grade classroom or a 4th grade classroom, let's do 3rd grade because I know they team teach. So maybe Cheryl and Leanne decide that, for half an hour in the morning, we're just going to do evidence with these kids. Would you take, Cheryl, would you take these kids and just do evidence? And then I see this pocket of kids, they don't know how to explain evidence. They've got good evidence, but it just sits there. So Leanne, would you take these kids and would you go over how do you explain your evidence and just work in a small group and do that kind of stuff? That's the kind of culture where teachers are working together to identify the strengths and weaknesses and then address them. And that's when we really start to focus on what every student and every classroom needs. But it takes us a while to get there. One of the things that we're looking at is, are we giving kids text that's complex enough? Are we doing Charlotte's Web in 2nd grade? Are we doing Charlotte's Web as a read aloud in kindergarten, and then are they reading it as a chapter book in 2nd grade, and then is it on the mandatory reading list in 4th grade? Like, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about in terms of text complexity and understanding what we're asking kids to do over time, so that we're not replicating. We can be really efficient.
Well, I would think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you only get this information on a grade level, right? It's not.
No, these are school-wide discussions.
No,
Wait,
I mean.
This comes on a grade, so we get this every grade level in both content and STEM, and STEM. And then we also get individual, we can run a report that we get each student's responses as well.
That's the key part, is trying to figure out who to target to help, right?
Exactly.
Well, I think it goes to your larger point. You said that in 3rd grade they're team teaching. It seems like it would require a lot of that.
Right.
Across grade levels, not
Yeah.
only in 3rd grade.
So,
and it also requires a lot of, that to me seems like another culture shift, right? Because it's like you said, it's not about blame and who did what wrong. It's, being able to have faith that this is just about what do we need to be doing differently.
Right. Yeah.
And that's
And thinking differently. So, for example, in 3rd grade and in 5th and 6th, they're teaching content. So Cheryl Danette is teaching English, language arts, and Leanne Frank is teaching math. So now they can become very expert in content, and then when they're talking together, they can say, listen, I need more time for this, or I need more time for that, and they can work together to build their day so that there's intervention blocks, so that kids are getting what they need. And it isn't that, they do, math from 10 to 10:30 and there's no change in that. It's getting people to understand the flexibility and sort of the organic nature of how kids learn and how we provide them direct instruction, support, intervention, extension, independence. Like, how does that all work? Because those are the classrooms that you walk in and you can hear it. There's like a buzz that's going on in the classroom. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's pretty much probably doing something a little different. But the direct instruction part is happening right at the targeted level of students. I think that my understanding is that in Granby that was happening, and then there was a shift for whatever reason, and my hope is that we go back to, and the principals are talking about that as well, going back to that idea of really understanding the learning needs of students, not so much the basal texters.
It sounds more enjoyable too. You know, it just sounds like, I want to be in that classroom.
The insights are,
Yeah.
yeah.
But when you get kids talking, oh,
The kids are engaged. The kids are very much engaged.
Yeah.
well, they also learn how to help each other. You talk about social emotional learning.
Right.
You know, when they have to read each other's work or read each other's writing and give feedback, like that's part of the things that they have to do in the classroom.
Well, you see how it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
You know, the social emotional, the
Yeah.
peace builders, you know, this team teaching, this more collaborative, you know, independent, taking leadership, just,
Yeah.
you know, it's all connected.
Did we look at, even though this is the new test,
Well, I think that's it.
did we look at how they've done in the old system, the legacy MCAS?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Is that, I mean, it may do a few things. One is there is a suggestion
Mhm.
that we may see a number of students who were previously proficient go somewhere. We can
Right.
see what that really means. The other one is we may actually not see that as prominently,
Mhm.
but we may see that at those two classes, you know, there is something going on, and it may allow us to focus on those root causes as opposed to
Yes.
saying, hey, you know, it's a test,
Yep, yep.
it is what it is.
Mhm.
It may just allow us to see some of the clues. And I'm sure you guys are talking about those.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see
So-
how they compare.
One of the things we are doing, particularly at the middle school level, is trying to understand, is there a relationship between the grades that students are earning and the next generation scores? So that's been an interesting wonder, because we have a handful of students that are earning A's and B's and then end up with a partially meeting expectation. And that just doesn't seem right. And why is that? And so helping us understand how could that be? Is our instruction rigorous enough? Are our projects rigorous enough? Are our expectations rigorous enough? And so, you know, middle school is a challenging time. How do we balance social emotional learning and all of the things that they're doing with the academic needs? But that's a question we have. And when you look at it and you list the students and you list their MCAS scores and their grades, that's a topic that's going to be a very good topic of conversation.
Well, Cheryl, don't you have classes that have more special ed children in them where they have accommodations? So that offsets some of these numbers where you're gonna have the high percentage that's not meeting and or partially meeting. Don't you have to look at those numbers also?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've been the one who has administered those tests to children who have accommodations, and you're the one doing the reading and biting your tongue when you watch them. Oh yeah, as you're reading, they're filling in bubbles, you know, and you haven't even finished reading what the directions are. And so that has to play a part in because you have some grade levels that have a higher amount of these special ed children compared to another grade level that might have 1 or 2, and this is 8 or 9, and how does that play into this?
So, you know, when we look at our subgroups, we look at not only special education, but English language learners, and tracking their progress. And, you know, at the end of the day, for our special education students, if they are receiving modifications and accommodations appropriately, then it would lead you to believe that they could be successful on the test.
It shouldn't skew the
Right?
numbers.
So, and yet it does, we know
Yeah.
it does. And so how do we make sure that the accommodations and modifications that we have are supporting student learning? And that is a conversation that we have often around looking at our demographics and our subgroups, looking at our poverty, our low-income students, and trying to understand what's influencing the outcome of their results. So it's.
Is this a time box, or is it the old way if somebody needs to take their time?
They have the day, I
Okay.
believe. Well,
Because
special
part, I
ed
think, was
has.
trying to change that. It
Yeah,
was-
they were
and that was
trying
causing
to-
some
yes.
stress.
Yes.
Yeah. The one thing that a lot of folks tried to explain that to me, but the way we stop at grade 10, when we talk about college readiness and career readiness, which, I'm skeptical sometimes when it comes to those terms, but when we talk about those, we stop at 10, and then we expect that,
Yeah, it's all good. You're good.
their SAT is gonna do
Yeah.
the measurement if they do decide to go to
Yeah.
college kind of thing, or ACT. That still doesn't make much sense to me, that we're not really trying to understand whether or not, if I'm a 10th grader and I was struggling, who's keeping track of my improvement, my growth, grade 11, grade 12, to make sure that I'm getting
Right.
out of Granby or any other school for that matter, with those skills that everybody wants me to have.
Right. So I think the thought behind grade 10 as the gateway year was such that if you had students that weren't successful and needed to retake, that there was time in their career for them to be able to do that. So the competency part of MCAS, that gateway of you have to be able to do these things in order to earn a diploma, there was some thought into allowing students to retake, but then also, to your point, students can be put on individual learning plans if they don't master MCAS, and then we do track them so that they're taking the coursework that would allow them to demonstrate that they've earned their diploma. Those aren't our warning kids or our failure kids. Those were the needs improvement high kids. That needs improvement was always cut into two categories. So those were the kids that we could put on improvement, individual learning plans, track them, and then certify that their work was of rigor enough that they would be determined to have a diploma. But to your point, it must be odd to be a 10th grader and pass your MCAS, and then, everything else, what do you do?
And I'm not even looking for another standardized
No,
test for
yeah.
11th or 12th graders. What I'm hoping to see is a really a holistic look at the student, as we always say, and say, okay, if I have these milestones where I'm checking on these students, how do I really build on that outside these standardized tests? Because I think it's no secret that I'm not a huge fan of standardized tests, but they serve a purpose, and with that purpose, if they can be connected to other things. One example, how do we really connect these to the student's success when it comes to getting to the colleges that they want to go to, getting to the careers that they want to go to? When I went to some of the conversations that we had when PARC was about to be implemented, same questions, because the idea was, colleges tell us that these students aren't ready. Which colleges? Well, how do you get that? How do you know that that's really the right feedback to use for these things? There was really no clear answer to that. And this is the skeptical part, and I don't think I'm alone in that, because the companies that typically set up these standardized tests are the few, and some of them are also involved in your SATs and ACTs, right? So they throw some here and then they say, oh, the rest of it we'll just, we're going to test you when you're about to go to college with your SAT and ACT. So there are a lot of breaks, but there's really no connection in terms of getting that whole education to the student. I'm hoping this is a different direction. If it's truly reflective of Massachusetts values in terms of education, that's to be seen, I guess. But I'm glad that it is different than the legacy MCAS.
And I will try over the next couple of weeks to get you some questions so you can see at the different grade levels.
Oh. Okay. Any questions on MCAS for Cheryl? Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. That was good. It's
Well,
always
I
good
do
to
have
see.
one. You had 3 PowerPoints. This is what bothering me. What was the difference between them? Because I read them, and there were.
I don't think there were any.
Yeah, I didn't
I
think
don't
so.
know how they got 3 in there. I don't know.
Well, one of them was format.
Yeah.
Two of
one's a
them were
PDF.
PowerPoint.
One-
One was a PDF.
I always try to do a PDF.
One was
One's
PowerPoint,
a
and the other one was something
Okay,
else.
And I think
read
Kathy
them all, trying to
sometimes-
find the difference.
Yeah.
Downloads them, and I don't know. I don't.
That's how we spent the whole night last night.
Last night I was
Just
up late trying to
compare.
figure it out. Thought it was a test.
You passed.
All right. So that's all we have remaining from our old business. Are we going to do policy approval?
So we had second readings of C and I, so tonight would be a vote to approve C and I.
Okay. Did everybody get a chance to look at the policies? Well, we did because she says yes.
Doing very well. Yeah,
C and I are our friends.
they are.
Yes. Dan and Mike, would you be ready to vote? Or?
I don't know, so I have to go into the other folder. I didn't see that folder,
Okay.
so my apologies.
So I did reorganize that because I was confusing myself. I was having trouble remembering where the policies were on the dates that we talked about them, so you'll notice, and I'm happy to postpone a vote because of that.
It's fine.
Created a school committee policy folder that if there are policies that are ready for a vote, that's where they will be. And then for Emery and Jen, there's a school committee there's a
Subcommittee folder, yeah.
policy, and that's where our work is.
Okay.
But if it's final, it's in that policy.
What's it called?
School committee
It
policy.
is school committee policy, and those are final. You want me to add final?
Yeah. You have to make it really simple.
I know.
No, that's
I was
that's fair.
confusing
It is. It does get
myself.
I'm like,
confusing.
where are, I have a policy, I have a folder for Annabelle, I had a policy for me, then I have it all on my Finder, in my my
Yeah.
computer too. It's a hot mess. So, anything moving forward that we make policy changes to that's a final, we'll put, or needs discussion at a school committee. This is where it'll be.
Yeah, even in that folder suggestion, the school committee policy, there is the MASC version for comparison purposes. I think that final thing may help. For our vote, we would know that that's what we're going to be voting on.
Okay.
Because we know what the comparisons are and all that because we, went through them, but
So
Yeah.
I could do a new folder. So you had asked that everybody be able to see the comparisons.
no, that's absolutely valuable, at least to me. It's good to see what the changes were and why we did what we did. Not only for this committee, for future committees as well. When they look at what we've done, they can see how we made the changes if they want to. But in terms of the vote, because as you said, there are so many different versions that we went through, if we just tag them as final, we would know that that's what we're voting on. And as we speak, things are changing. So we're gonna table the MCAS, MCAS, policy vote to next time. One
So
thing.
it's gonna be policy final. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I just did.
Okay.
So here's my intent. My intent is to, within that folder, is to have an MASC Granby, oops, I had to rename that, policy comparison. It's not even late. I will rename that appropriately in a minute. I will move all of the comparisons into
In that one, yep.
So if anybody's interested, it's there, but
Okay.
everything else would be final.
Yep.
Okay.
And you will call them final in the version? Okay. Thank you. One thing that did not make it here that I want to quickly talk about. We mentioned it last time, so it is old business. Superintendent evaluation for our meeting on the 8th, I believe.
Yeah.
So what we will do the same way we've done in the last couple of years, we're going to use the DESE standards that I think everybody's familiar with. Maybe you were not here, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so we may have some conversations on that, Mike, if you have questions. But I think everybody else at least had one
Remember,
experience.
January 8th?
Yeah.
All right, I'm away that week. I'm in Florida.
Okay. So here's the it would be great to have everybody here, but here's maybe the saving grace of this process. I will send you the guidelines, as I mentioned last time, and then I will ask you to fill out your sections with your comments. We don't really go member by member and then talk about it. We just have this aggregate version of the evaluation, and then we share that. And if there are any comments, anybody can make comments, obviously, at that time. So it's no big deal. I will, in that email, ask everyone to send their evaluations to me. I will aggregate it, make it part of the meeting agenda, then we can speak to it when we meet.
There is something in one of these folders already.
Yes, so
Yeah.
there is a superintendent evaluation folder.
And there's
Because
some,
again, I was getting lost with where that
Right.
information was, so I thought, you know what, this isn't helping.
but there is,
So there's evidence.
there's a document too.
So Cheryl
evaluating the
already did
superintendent.
her side of it? Is that what
No,
you're
you
asking?
were saying that you were gonna send out,
Yes, I will
the
send a link
guideline?
so that everybody knows where it is, but if you already found it, you're good.
it's in that folder.
Yes.
It's a guide for the school committee, school councils, and parents evaluating the superintendent under the new Massachusetts Educator Evaluation
Yeah.
System.
It's no longer new, actually, but, yeah.
It's a 32-page document, so it's in that folder. Good luck. Good luck with that.
But you're familiar with
Oh
it.
yeah, the first time I did
Yeah.
it took me all day. So hopefully it won't take you guys that long. The second time was much easier.
Yeah.
How many times did we do it? Did we do it
I
3
think
times?
We did 3 times.
I don't remember the third time.
Yeah,
Did
we've
we
done
do it? Are you sure we did it 3 times?
I believe we did. Because we
was
started
there
the
for
first year.
Judy's.
When it came up, we picked it up and we ran with it.
Maybe one was Miss Judy.
I know
Yeah, we
one
did-
for
we did one with Judy.
One for Isabelina.
Yeah. I think we did
for Judy?
twice for Isabelina.
We
I
did?
think, yeah. I may be wrong, but it's so much fun that you forget how many times you've done. So,
I think I blocked it out.
but it's a good conversation. So,
So when do you want this by?
so I will need it that I will say the Wednesday before, so I have time to put it together. But if it's earlier than that, I can obviously finish it earlier and then put it out there. But with all the holidays and everything else, I don't know if anybody's gonna have time to complete it. So the 8th is a Monday, Wednesday the 3rd, and I will mention all that in the email that I will send out
So the Wednesday before,
before the
The
that's
meeting.
the 3rd.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez.
And because Tuesday is going to be the first day back to work for a lot of people.
It is
so,
gonna
yeah.
be the first day.
Yep.
Okay.
What a great way to finish the year then on that weekend. And okay, so that was my quick reminder that we're gonna do that. You have a superintendent's report.
I do.
Yep.
I do. Let's- Okay. All right. I wanted to say congratulations to our Granby Junior Senior High School students who had their art displayed at the Tabor Gallery in Holyoke Community College. 5 of our 8 students earned awards for their work, and Granby was by far, and I know I'm biased, but by far the most representative of all the area schools. And I mean by like an amazing amount. So congratulations to them. During our learning walks over the past 2 weeks, students have demonstrated wonderful growth in collaborative learning, individual interventions, and problem solving. It is clear that our elementary school students know, understand, and practice our classroom and peace builder expectations, which is a strong foundation from which to learn. At Granby Junior Senior High School, we've conducted learning walks, and students, we observe students providing feedback on written work to each other. We've watched them participate in digital labs. They were actively engaged in many different problem-solving activities as well. And then lastly, as I've already said, I'm excited to report that the Strategic Planning Task Force has drafted 4 strategies that they feel capture the important work of the district moving forward. And I'm excited to share the final drafts of the work with the school committee in the new year. So with that, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to all, and we'll see you in 2018.
Yeah, and I
Like 8. It's gonna be a long year. And I don't know whether to make a snowman or a.
and I don't want to forget. Marie wished everyone a happy holiday as well. Since she already knew that you were going to read your report. It's great. I saw the pictures that you posted from the gallery. Great work. It's awesome. I couldn't even tell on some of them whether they were photographs or paintings, and
I know, it was amazing.
yeah,
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 it really was amazing.
yeah. I mean, that's one style I know, but some of them are that meticulous with
Yeah.
with their work. Very creative, very colorful, and it was awesome.
It's a beautiful event too.
And it
Yeah.
was
CC does for
multimedia, so it
Yeah.
was acrylics, it was watercolor, it was pottery, it
Yeah.
was.
My daughter was in
it
that
was
show when she was in
amazing.
school. Yeah.
I didn't get everybody. I think I have everybody on the website, but it was
That's
just
a nice
amazing.
event.
Yeah.
I like that coffee coming from
Yes.
3. So if anybody missed it, it's on the school Facebook page, right?
It's yes, it's on the webpage.
Webpage. Okay. Anything for Cheryl on the report? Anything from the collaborative?
No, we didn't meet, we're not gonna meet again until,
Okay. The school building committee. Did we have anything recently?
No, I believe we have a meeting coming.
I think
There's
we.
a vote tomorrow night, right, on the feasibility for West Street?
That's the
Or is that something
town.
different?
That's not
That you
part
guys
of
have
our
nothing to do
thing.
with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
No,
Yeah, I'm not sure if we decided to meet in December or not.
right. I don't think so. I think it's January, but January
Okay.
just feels like it's right around the corner.
Yeah, it is.
January 4th, school building.
Okay.
you are ready to
Cool.
make the move, I think it's the week after, or.
Yeah, we are
next
on
week, right?
track.
Yes.
Yep, we are on track.
Yeah, that's probably one thing that we should mention. It's on track for the move in February, so we should be all
Oh, it's February, I
good.
thought it was Christmas, but okay.
Yeah. Oh, then it's a good thing we made.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was Christmas.
No, we're not on track for Christmas.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, students are moving home for the Christmas break.
And then I try for a little bit more, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Policy subcommittee, Jen?
We have nothing to report.
Okay. We're gonna be meeting next week or the week after, I guess?
Do we have
I
any?
sent you a doodle.
And I couldn't do it because I'm away. Like the first 2 weeks of January.
Oh, first, okay.
I'm
This-
at a grad school visitation, like the 2nd through the 4th, and then I fly to Florida on Sunday for a week.
December 28th?
December 28th, I'm free.
Okay.
Was that one of the dates?
Yeah.
I
Alright,
must
so
have
we're
said
good.
yes to it.
Must.
Alright, so that's good. Maybe December 20th we can do it. Anything else that we did not mention that you guys would like to bring up? Anything that we should include in the next meeting other than superintendent's evaluation and the policy vote that is moving to January 8th?
So, if we have a draft of the strategies from the strategic planning, we should probably think about FY19 budget parameters or budget goals for the school committee to give to me to give to the leadership team.
Yep.
So, social emotional learning.
So I have one question to wrap up then. Did we hear anything about the special town meeting for the additional funds?
No, they couldn't meet on the 18th today, so, and the only word I heard was that there was no joint meeting scheduled, so.
And I think that
So the
it's
joint
all good,
meetings-
but it's
yeah.
moot right now.
Right.
If we're not going to receive the funding the way we requested, it has to
Right.
go to the special
Yep.
town meeting, and it's up to the select board to decide when and whether they would
So
like to
I
go
will
to the special
email
town
Chris
meeting.
tomorrow
Okay.
and give him a call.
All right.
And
Great.
So we're asking for the special meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll conclude our open session, and we're going to vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session.
Deanne
can we-
Markowski, aye.
Thank you.
Jen Kurt and I.
Emre Van I.
Mike Simpson, aye?
Thank you. Have a good evening.